Good evening everybody and welcome to this evening's Urban Planning Committee meeting on the 25th of May 2016. In recognising our cultural diversity of our great city, I pay my respects to the local Indigenous people of Moreland by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. Offer my respects to the Wurundjeri elders past and present and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Members of the gallery, please note this Urban Planning Committee meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to Council's website. This recording will be available as video on demand and gallery attendees are advised they may be recorded during the meeting. Councillors and officers in attendance tonight, Councillor Megan Hopper, Councillor John Kavanagh.
Good evening.
Myself, Helen Davidson, Councillor Lambros Tapanos, Councillor Lenka Thompson. And the officers in attendance tonight are Acting Group Manager of City Development, Robert Chatford, Planning Coordinator, Darren Camilleri, Senior Urban Planner, David Portelli, and Governance Officer, Saskia Hunter. I'd also like to acknowledge our Mayor, Councillor Samantha Ratnam, who's sitting in the gallery this evening. Do we have any apologies for this evening?
I believe there's an apology from Councillor Gillies.
Moved by Councillor Kavanagh. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Hopper. All those in favour? I declare that carried. And could I please have a motion for the adoption of the minutes for the meeting held on the 27th of April 2016? Moved by Councillor Hopper. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kavanagh. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Now I'll just move on to a brief introduction for our members of the gallery and those sitting at home watching this evening. This is how the Urban Planning Committee will run tonight. The relevant planner will introduce the report and the officer's recommendations. I'll then give any objectors the opportunity to move to the lectern in front of us to make their submissions. After this time, the applicant will be given an opportunity to speak. If you're making a submission tonight, please state your name and address clearly for the record. You're requested to present your viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the planning application. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on the relevant issues not previously raised. If you're opposed to the planning application, please inform the committee why you are opposed and suggest an alternative approach which would satisfy your concerns. Please use the opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than matters of detail in the officer's report. I note there is a time limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, but as chairperson I reserve the right to increase the time or reduce the time available to the speaker. Now we'll move on to the first and only planning application for this evening, DED 39/2016, 132 Nicholson Street, Brunswick East, planning application MPS 2015-660. And I'll pass to Darren to give an outline of the application.
So up on the screen we have the subject site located on the east side of Nicholson Street in Brunswick East. There's a photograph of the existing dwelling that's on the site. The subject site's 372 square metres in size and it's got a rear access to a laneway. There's a 3D image of the proposal which is for 5 3-bedroom dwellings. At the back of the site is the rear laneway, a photograph, which will provide access to a car stacker arrangement which provides access for 10 car spaces for the 5 dwellings. Up on the screen are the plans that were advertised, which are showing the car stackers at the rear and I guess it's like a townhouse style development, which is the ground level with the bedrooms, and then the middle level has got the living areas with balcony, known as a reverse living arrangement. And then on the 3rd floor we have the further bedroom with a roof deck on the uppermost floor. There are some elevations of the proposal as it's seen from Nicholson Street and the side elevations. And the rear elevation and the south elevation. The application was advertised and we received a total of 14 objections to the proposal, including 3 pro forma objections. And they're the location of the objectors. The site's located or covered by Design Development Overlay Schedule 20, which has been adopted by Council, and that provides guidance in relation to the preferred height for the subject site and the surrounding area. I guess it's noticeable, worth noting that that does include 3 to 4 stories in this particular area, or for the subject site up to 14 metres in height. And that is a departure from a lot of the existing character where there's a lot of single stories in the area. So the preferred character is somewhat different than the existing, consistent with the zoning of the land, which is a designated residential growth zone. Just showing a bit of context in relation to some nearby development approvals at 122 Nicholson Street. And what we have at the top right-hand corner in green is the subject site. And we can see in red recent approvals or buildings that are on the way to be completed, shown in the photographs in the nearby area. It's recommended that a notice of decision to grant a planning permit be issued for the proposal, because the proposal achieves a higher level of compliance with the adopted Design Development Overlay Schedule 20, and which establishes a new preferred character of mid-rise buildings up to 14 metres. And the proposal provides the required car parking spaces as per the planning scheme and will not create any unreasonable traffic impacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Is there an objector who wishes to speak first? Yes, please come forward.
How you going? I'm Mark Ryan from 136 Nicholson Street, East Brunswick, which is next door to the site. I'm also here representing my wife, Sarah Ryan, who put in an objection. She's not able to attend tonight. I also have apologies from Lily Bandy and David Eyre, which live next door, who are interstate and can't attend, so I'm on their behalf. I'm also here on behalf of Brian O'Keefe, who put one in from 144 Nicholson Street. He's interstate as well. And also Lionel Ryan, who's from 144, is here as well, but he's not feeling too well, so I'm getting up and speaking on his behalf as well.
Thank you.
All right. So what I was going to do is just go through, just go through the areas of that report that I'm objecting to, and then some other issues, and mainly non-compliance to the Moreland planning scheme. So is that all right?
Yes.
Okay, now you start off with the report, the executive summary. It says planning discussions which did not result in any. We had a meeting on 9th of March and didn't result in anything. Well, that's incorrect, and the meeting was probably deemed a bit of a waste of time. During that meeting, we actually discussed a few things. One of them was to alleviate overshadowing and overlooking on my property in 130 Nicholson Street. I suggested they flip the design so that all parties seem to agree with the proposal as a way of moving forward, and they said they would send revised drawings. So approximately about 4 weeks later, I contacted the architect for the drawings, and he said, send me an email, I'll send it to you. This went on for 3 weeks, no contact. I got no drawings. I rang up David Patelli last week and said, have you got the drawings, the revised? He said, no, we're not going with those drawings. He said, the agreement of the meeting wasn't binding because there's no minutes or anything taken as well, so that's a major concern. The other concern for a lot of the residents was the rear access and proposed car stacker. So I'd also requested car stacker drawings from David in February the 16th. He supplied the car stacker drawings, which also referenced 132 Nicholson Street on the drawings. So I started to go through highlight the issues with the car stacker as opposed to the plans, because there are the inconsistencies. And then the architect then declared that the car stacker drawings supplied were incorrect. So, like I said, wasting everyone's time, and then they would supply the correct drawings. Well, as of this day, we haven't been supplied correct drawings, and I believe the report even mentions that to get approval, I have to provide the specification of the car stacker, which is fairly critical to this proposal. Also, during the discussions, another disappointing thing was that it came up that David Patelli, the chief planner of the job, hadn't even visited the site and didn't even look at the rear access lanes, look at measurements and whatnot. So a lot of people are a little bit concerned about that. Looks like he's just relying on the architect developer's details as fact and not actually checking anything himself. So that was that meeting, which, like I said, most of the residents thought it was a bit of a waste of time, and that's why some of them said they weren't coming tonight because they thought, what's the point? Getting into the report, so the recommendation, at least one mechanical car space should accommodate at 1 point high, I think is his recommendation. Clause 5206-8 says at least 25% mechanical car spaces shall accommodate a vehicle clearance, a height of at least 1.8 foot, 10 cars or more. So therefore, this would require at least 2.5 to 3 car spaces at 1.5 height, so there's a non-compliance. As I said, also in the section K, he mentioned the specifications, including model numbers, upper ground clearances and dimensions to be supplied, because obviously the planners haven't got it yet. This is also detailed in the meeting, and it looks like it hasn't been supplied, and this is a key issue with the rear access requirements. We go to section 2, internal consultation. The key issues were objections that were the buildings. They said were buildings, car parking, etc. There's no mention of the major non-compliances to the Moreland planning scheme, and there's no mention of all the drawing errors that we highlighted showing misleading and inaccurate drawings supplied. Also, it says no objections were offered for the proposal from the Strategic Planning and Urban Safety branch. So this is not quite, I'm not sure about this one. I contacted Craig Pearce, the Senior Development Advice Engineer, on the 29th of February in regards to vehicle access, rear access and vehicle congestion associated with the development. Craig responded the same day confirming the council engineers had considered the proposal but did not provide any details of the engineering response and advised that any concerns had to go through David Portelli. So I obviously sent a reply back to both of them and said, can you please give me the engineering response before the March 9 meeting? And I didn't receive a response. Item 3, policy implications. Now I know this is all about this DDO 20. So the thing I'm concerned about is the amendment. The DDO 20 hasn't even been approved by the Minister. It's not even due for review until March 2017. So why are we considering it at this proposal? The only really applicable document legally would be the Moreland planning scheme. So then we go into the report in terms of the issues, which is does the proposal respond to the preferred character of the area? Planning clause 550601. Standard B31 specifies the design respects existing or preferred neighbourhood character, including facade, articulation, window and door proportions, roof form, verandas, etc. The existing neighbourhood consists of period homes and buildings. 136, 142 and 144 Nicholson Street were built in the 1890s, and the proposed development is basically a box with no neighbourhood character or appeal and doesn't match the adjoining properties. The development's overall height is 13.1 metres from the footpath, next to shops that are like 7.5 metres high. So this will make this proposal look like a skyscraper, which is totally out of character of the surrounding neighbourhood. I've got all these minutes if you want to. I've got copies if you would like to look while I'm talking, or yeah, sure. So in the DDO 20, I'd like some clarification. I mean, why are we following the DDO 20, and also, are you able to define what is considered an activity centre, and how is this different to an activity node? I'm not sure if you're able to answer it now.
We might take questions at the end.
After the end? Okay. Also mentions the proposal acceptable response to the DDO 20 with all its 3 stories, maximum height 4 stories. And he went on to say the proposal provides a 10.1 metre street wall, and this is incorrect, as actually the building is set back 1 metre from the street wall, which is 1.2 high. So the building, according to the DDO 20, should be set back 3 metres away from the street wall. This also would, if they did that, it would resolve the non-compliance reference in report for the setback of rooftop stairs, which also is out of compliance, and also would enable clause 3207 for residential growth zones, specifying 1 tree should be planted within the front setback in accordance with the Moreland Tree Planting Manual for residential codes. The proposal doesn't have any trees included, only some small shrubs under the street balcony. Alternatively, to comply to DDO 20, the building should be moved forward by 1 metre to the street wall. This would also improve rear access. although it would make the rooftop stair setback more non-compliant. He's also gone through and mentioned the plans show a building height of 10.135, height above natural ground level is 9.225 metres, so it's a difference in height of 0.91 metres. This is actually incorrect, and because the actual natural ground level measured is 1.4 metres above the footpath. So the actual building height would be 10.625 from the footpath. The rooftop stairs are defined in the report as 1.6 metres above the facade. I'm not sure how he's determined that, because the drawings, the north elevation drawings, have no dimensions and show the rooftop stairs as a very faint outline. So also, this is not viable anyway, because you need 2.2 metres minimum stair headroom to get out. So I don't know how he gets his 1.6 metres. So this gives the overall building height of 3.1 metres from the footpath.
Mark, I'm just conscious of the time, so if you could summarise and wind up.
Yeah. Now, because I'm representing a few people, I think you did say I could have a little bit more time.
I
Yep.
have given you quite some time. It's coming
So
up
I've
to-
got the major other things is the car parking. So we've got 520608, which defines the width of the laneway. That's they're not meeting that. The other one is the car stacker. The drawing shows, I've actually got an independent reverse analysis done. It shows that actually you can't get out the lane in any of the positions, not allowing the one that was shown in the drawing. So I'd like to submit that. There's no passing area. He's mentioned a 2 metre passing area. I think according to the planning scheme, you need 5 metre wide and 7 metre long. And the big one, which a lot of the residents have got problems with, is the 90-degree access. So from the standard, you need 6.4 metres for a 2.6 car space, and the car setback on this drawing is only 2.02 metres. It's only a 2.9 laneway at the back, so so they're miles outside the standard, and that's the biggest concern with a lot of residents, is that you won't be able to get in and out, and the congestion. Car congestion. So there's a lot of business about the car congestion in the neighbourhood, and since the tram stop got put in, anyone who lives in the area can tell you that the congestion and the traffic has just got horrendous. Now we're going to put 10 more people into a laneway with 9 people already there, and he's saying that there's like a very little impact on the congestion. The other main thing is clause 55, which is the big one. So all the ones are there, the setback, which is 5503, he says 1.7, actually if you follow it should be 1.83 metres from the setback. He's non-compliant at 1 metre. The site coverage objective, they've said it's 69%, it should be 60% max. I'd like to know how come they're allowed to get through with that, because the permeability objective is supposed to be 20% for the site. The drawings say 9.1%. I'd like to know why, and this is obviously, that's our objection, is that this is an overdevelopment and these sorts of things show up. Site and rear setback objective. So he's put in the side objectives. I've actually done my own analysis, and he's a metre inside the setback boundary, but also if you look at the top screens they have to provide for the thing, they're actually nearly 2 metres into the boundary. So I'd like to know how they can get through the clause 55 on the setback. Overlooking objective, looks like they've decided to put screens for the overlooking. Storage objective, they've gone for 2 metre cubic metres, you're supposed to have 6 metres, and they've said that you can store stuff inside the house and under the stairs. Well, that standard clause 5505 is for external storage, so I'm not sure how they do it. They've also mentioned relocating the bike racks.
Mark, I'm going to have to ask you to
Wind it up.
wind it up very quickly.
All right. Okay, so the response to our objections, so the main thing is that he says they meet the objectives of DDO 20 and clause 55. I've just highlighted that clause 55 is a lot of non-compliances. DDO 20, I'd like clarification on why we're actually using it. So the recommendation would be to scale down the development to 2 or 3 units to meet all the requirements of the planning scheme. This would require less excavation during construction and provide dwellings with more living and open space suited to families rather than oversized apartments, as you've just shown everywhere, currently under construction in the south of Bligh Street. The other major issue, which I'd just like to finish on, is the construction issue. So the major issue is this right now. We've just been through the tram stop debacle with all the road. As you know, it's solid rock about 1 metre down. They're proposing a 6 metre pit stacker in the back. So how they're going to build it. Now he says you don't have to comply. It's not a planning issue, but clause 32079 states the application must contain the likely effects, if any, of adjoining land, including noise levels, traffic, hours of delivery, dispatch of goods and materials, hours of operation, etc. So the application does not define the proposed construction plan or noise levels, including all the rock excavation. So we want to know how it's going to be actually built, how it's going to be done, and how do you get material in and out of the property, because you can't get in Nicholson Street and the lane's only 2.7 wide in places, so you can't get trucks up. So also my nurse is a night duty, works night duty. She's an essential service provider, and if they're drilling rocks for 6 months out the house, she won't be able to sleep, so we can't put up with that.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for speaking on behalf of the residents that couldn't be here this evening as well.
Can I give you copies? You will like copies?
Yes, you're more than welcome to hand those up. Is there another objector who wishes to speak? Yes, please come forward.
Thank you.
Good evening, panel. My name's Arthur Deasis. I'm here on behalf of my mother, who owns the property at 128, 130 Nicholson Street, East Brunswick. Neighbour and learned friend sent it all. We basically, technically, he's given us all the requirements and objections in regards to the codes and standards that we're supposed to be abiding by, and council as well. But I might as well just add the additional objection to myself, apart from what has already been said, is that there's site title boundary inconsistencies. Just a quick one to tell you that my father passed away 16 years ago, and part of that, this is the reason why I'm here, it was part of that was because it went through to a court battle with the neighbour, and we won in the end. Basically, the site boundary wall is between 80 to 50 millimetres inside the actual property. So
Inside the adjoining property?
Inside the actual site wall is inside our property, the 128, 130,
right,
by 80 to 50 mil.
Okay.
So that was a win on our part, but came to my dad's demise because he spent a lot of money and never got any back. Also, we've spoken about the site coverage, the impervious surface, the site permeability. The other thing I'd like to address is the overlooking concern. I haven't seen, it says on the plan that there's screens, I think, or in the thing that the screen's going up there. I suppose with the planning application that you'll be receiving proper drawings in regards to showing overlooking views and making sure that there's a kitchen window, which is basically a habitable room. Also, I'd like to address that the building at the back and the drawings, well, the actual architectural drawings do not show the actual current building at the back in regards to the windows. It's at the moment it's used as or it's leased out as a studio yoga apartment, but for the last 40 years it's been a residence. And I'm looking at, when you're saying here in the report that there's no overshadowing, there is actually 100% overshadowing, so that apartment studio area will be 100% blackout. The windows haven't been shown on the plan, so you're obviously not going to see where the windows are, so it means that existing conditions of the adjoining property hasn't been actually made or drawn up well. So the other thing is we're worried about is the traffic management, which has already been brought up with my learned friend here. And I'll just add to that is basically just the safety of the people coming up and down that area. if we're talking about the one instance, someone was telling us that it's not a laneway, it's a road. It's actually deemed a laneway, but there's no lighting, there's no pedestrian walkways, and I don't think you can actually put any pedestrian walkways or lighting down that area. The thing that we're sort of really afraid of is that basically there's also a toilet area that, again, that is used by the shopping complex in that corner, which is in the back lane. And it's, like I said, it's a safety issue in regards to the pedestrians walking up and down, and obviously a safety issue to the people who are actually going to be living in this development, because there's no way, I believe, that they're all going to be going out through the front door. I suppose it's all covered in regards to, we're talking about the waste bins and the noise, the building height, and obviously the plans that have been drawn up aren't correctly shown as the existing situation. And just last but not least, the DDA compliancy, which I believe will be obviously forwarded through to the building department to make sure that that adheres to DDA compliancy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there another objector who wishes? Yes, please come forward.
Good evening, councillors. My name's Lee Collar-Peter. I live at 57 Ryan Street, East Brunswick, and I'm representing the residents and small businesses that are unable to attend this meeting due to work commitments and family commitments. Okay. The reason we're objection to this proposal is unable to communicate on behalf of the residents that unable to communicate due to limited understanding of English language, unable to attend due to commitment of their working hours, and not having an understanding of the formal process and policy procedure required, not having understanding of environmental and infrastructure and road management around the neighbourhood and the height density. Should the proposal go ahead, it will create chaos, disruption, inconvenience to the East Brunswick residents, small business and the general public travelling around the area as follows. As there's the laneway, firstly, should there be an emergency vehicle required, it's very difficult to drive along, as you've seen the photographs of how narrow the street is in Nicholson Street due to emergency, whether it's a fire or a health issue. Very difficult. What's the other one? And due to and having the platform there too, recently built in Blythe Street and Nicholson Street, residents living between Nicholson Street will be more inconvenienced having the transition of the proposal going ahead, having the great big vehicles on the property. I don't know how you're going to do it, if you've seen the photograph, let alone going down the laneway with all those big and digging the rocks, because Brunswick is known to have buildings digging with having those old rocks. And also speaking about residents living in the area, as well as the buses, the transport, the buses that travel along Blythe Street, from East Brunswick to Moonee Ponds, so East Brunswick to Essendon Station, and the other green bus which travels along Blythe Street down to Victoria Street, Sydney Road, and return. That's going to create chaos. But the one I'm concerned about is the red and white bus where they turn right in Nicholson Street on the corner of the Lomond Hotel. I mean, there's not much room as it is. And a lot of people are avoiding driving along or at the lights. And what they're doing is they're having entry to Robert Street and Ryan Street, turning right to miss Nicholson Street due to the traffic, turning left and then veering to Nicholson Street. And the weekly rubbish also collection. I'm forever seeing the rubbishman having difficulties having cars parked on both sides of Ryan Street, let alone the other areas, and cars are unable to get through. And the overall, the 2 hour parking that's supposed to be there, that hasn't been done. Yes, the signage is there, but I've never seen any officers. And when you ring the council, we'll send you one out. There's no policing of the parking. So the overall consideration of the planning committee with councillor, developers and others who have invested, would you allow this project to go ahead next door to you? As this project will certainly be an eyesore, please consider the following as mentioned per objection that I wrote over the development of the site, infrastructure and energy efficiency, inappropriate heights and density, locally visual and aesthetics, excuse my accent, public and private open space, mixed use and urban village, traffic management, traffic volume of streets and parking and calming, and along Nicholson Street, having seen many signs on residential location, I don't know whether you've probably seen it, driving along that Nicholson Street, there are signages for drivers to drive slowly. And those signages, it says, represented from Jane Garrett, MP of Brunswick, and the wording says to slow down.
Yeah, I'm just conscious of the time, so if you could summarise your points.
Beg your pardon?
If you could summarise your points now.
Well, I've already done that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And, okay.
Thank you. Is there another
Yes,
objection?
I'm my name's Lindsay Cox. I'm the owner of the yoga studio that's at 130 Nicholson Street. I don't need to tell you that the business of yoga involves peace and quiet. So obviously the construction of any building right next to a yoga studio is going to cause some noise and disruption. Now, I believe this site to be a massive overdevelopment of the site for the area. Although you're complying to certain overlays, the site itself won't fit in with the area. I believe that no other high-rise building is going to be built in the area. Now, I'll move on to the construction process itself, because it's inevitable some sort of construction is going to go ahead. On the corner of Blythe and Nicholson Streets, I'm talking about the south-east corner, there is a large construction about to go ahead there of, I think it's about 4 or 5 stories building. I mention this because during the process of constructing the tram stop, I was visited by the tram construction people. They came along and I said, have you seen this? This is Melbourne Water is doing major works on the continuation of Blythe Street. I think it's Separation or Arthurton. They were doing major works there and they were about to do it at the same time they were constructing the tram stop. So I want to ask if I may, what traffic management plans do we have for 2 major constructions going on in the same area? And I might mention that there is one site which has just been demolished about 70 metres away from the yoga studio, which is also on the corner of Ryan Street, which is also about to go into development, and not to mention a couple of other sites which I think have been bought by developers as well. So how does traffic management happen for so many projects in such a small area in such a congested intersection? So I'll just leave you with that. Thanks. As the owner of a business, and I realise that the process will be 6 months long, or so I heard, with the amount of massive boulders, etc., hidden underneath the earth here, as we've seen. A couple of constructions along Nicholson Street come to grief as they try to build their car parks, and they find that it once was a quarry and it's solid rock. So their process of construction stretches out for another 2 months. So this project might go on for a lot longer than 6 months. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further objectors who wish to speak? Yes, please come forward.
I lived quite close to this site for 20 years. I'm aware that it's a 11 or so metre high building. I'm also aware that it's shorter than the building across the road, the Lomond Hotel, built in the 19th century. I'm aware that it's shorter. It's not as tall as the Brunswick East Primary School, which was built in the 19th century. I'm aware that it's actually shorter than the Russian Orthodox Church, which was only built recently. And as for the neighbourhood character being one storey, I'm sorry, the area behind there is an extensive number of two-storey buildings. There's Kingfisher Gardens just to the north with all two-storey buildings. And opposite the Russian Church on Merri Creek, there's a three-storey block of flats built in the 1970s. This isn't the only development that's occurred in the area recently. Most of the buildings in this area, by the way, aren't 19th century, they're 1920s. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another objector who wishes to speak? If not, is there a representative for the applicant present? Yes? Do you wish to speak?
Yes.
Yes, please come forward.
Try and be as quick as possible. Thank you for the opportunity. I suppose one of the important things is the zone itself, and it's a residential growth zone. And the purpose of it, I suppose, has been discussed and sort of debated over many times now. This is, I suppose, an area that's concentrated there between Arthurton Road and Nicholson Street there, where the tram stops. And if you go to the immediate surroundings of it, most of the zones are neighbourhood zones. So I think in terms of what council's view of future planning is that these areas here have been identified. So we're trying to work within that area and trying to sort of have some form of development that is, responds to that sort of scheme, but also has a response in terms of other aspects of the planning scheme. Now, we went through quite an extensive process in trying to get this thing to work, but this type of zone does have when you're increasing the development, you're going to have some sort of challenges, and you're going to have some things that you've got to have to sort of, I suppose, your setbacks, your site coverages and so forth might be challenged. But it's in a location where I think the purpose of the zone is that this is where it should be, and temper developments in the neighbourhood zones. In the consultative meeting that we had, there was quite a few aspects that were discussed, and some of these were, as Mark correctly said, that one of them was to mirror the development. Now, we did submit drawings to council, showing how that would look and how that would be perceived, and to their opinion, it was better that it was left as it is. And for a few reasons, and one of the main reasons is that the balconies then would receive the northern orientation and receive northern light. So in David Portelli's and council's opinion, it was best left as they were. So we did provide those drawings to council. One of the things that we did also talk about was, and I see that the condition is not here on the permit, is a construction management plan, and we offered that voluntarily to because of the site, the size, and its location, and the tram stop and and all sorts of things, that we thought that would probably be an appropriate thing to manage the construction and manage the construction in a few manners, parking of the trades, traffic management, deliveries, all these type of things. So we quite happily to have that voluntary put in to appease the neighbours. In terms of the parking, a few issues were brought up about the condition 1. Now, as we know, with most planning permits, there are conditions, and those conditions need to be met. And some of them are more further clarification, some of them are changes. But they're all conditions that we've read through that have no... We don't have any issue in terms of trying to meet them, and especially with the car parking system and providing the compliance and the heights and the reversing and all of that is something that is something that we can easily meet. In terms of the development itself, it's 5 townhouses within a context where I think you saw earlier there is a change that is happening within that area, and this is where the zone seeks to put that change. So we're trying to follow in that same thing. They're not apartments, they're townhouses, so we think we've got a type of development that is quite desirable for the community. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. Are there any questions from councillors for the applicant? Councillor Thompson?
Yeah. Hi. Just in terms of the car stacker compliance, we had a few issues about the compliance of the car stacker. So if you could speak.
Well, some of the things that were brought up. One of the issues, or one of the questions that was brought up was the distance behind the cars. Now, true, yes, 2.6 requires 6.4, but the car spaces are wider, so you can reduce under the planning scheme. You can reduce the aisle width down if you have a wider space. So. It's also been through the traffic unit through council, and they've come back with no concerns. So I think we've got a 5 metre or 5.2 metre aisle width, which means from the back of the lane to the front of the car space. Yeah, which I think our car spaces, I can't off the top of my head, I think they're probably 2.8 wide. Yeah. So they're the parameters that we work with. And that's the parameters that were assessed by Council's traffic unit.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Any questions to the officer?
Yeah, I have a question.
Councillor Kavanagh?
Darren, the indication from Frank that the flipping plans were submitted and council was of the view to remain the way it's facing now. Is that do you agree with that interpretation?
I haven't seen those plans, but that's not to say that they weren't submitted to the other officer. I do recall the discussion I was at the planning information and discussion meeting, so I can confirm the discussions that took place in relation to that. It's without doubt that the flipping of the design would result in, my understanding was the concern was largely about overlooking from the balconies that would overlook the properties to the north, which would be resolved by flipping the design. But that obviously had a negative impact in terms of having the living areas then facing south without solar access. So I can confirm that the officer would have given that advice, and it wouldn't have been the officer's recommendation to flip the design for that reason for the future occupants.
Can I have one more for you, please, Darren? The design and development overlay, Schedule 20, what stage are we at with that? The gentleman was saying it hasn't been approved by the Minister. It
hasn't been approved by the Minister. I think a question from Mark was why is Council give weight to the design and development overlay? So Council often put forward draft plans for change in relation to the planning scheme, and when it does that, it's quite correct that there's no weight to be given to it. But once it goes on public exhibition, we receive comments, and then council considers those comments. It goes through a professional panel who review the amendment, and once it gets further along the stages, it starts to get more weight in terms of the decision making. The design development overlay is right at the end of the process, so because it's gone through all those processes and been council adopted, it's given significant weight in decision making either by council officers or by the tribunal.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
Are there any further questions from councillors to the officer?
But there was one other thing about the drawings not being correct on some points. Is that correct or not? I mean, is the allegation correct?
Yeah, there were some inaccuracies, and again, at the planning information discussion meeting, they were fleshed out. The officer's report mentioned some of them in terms of the recommendations for example, the car stacker specifications need to be correct. I think that came from the traffic engineer. But they're not matters in terms that can't be dealt with through conditions of permit.
Just one more. The coverage of the site is over 60% of the site, but because it's in a growth zone, we're viewing that as being acceptable. Is that correct? Or?
Yeah, that's correct. So in an activity centre, it would be expected that developments will be encouraged to exceed the standard of 60%.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? No? Is there a motion from councillors in relation to this application?
I'd like to move an alternative recommendation to the one before us. Point 1 at N, I'd like to add after point 1N, I'd like to add a point 1O. 6 cubic metres of storage space provided to each dwelling, in addition to the requirements of condition H. Point P, dwelling 1, including ground, first and second floor walls and balcony setbacks, an additional 0.68 metres from Nicholson Street. Point Q, the third story north-facing walls setback and or reduced in height to comply with standard B17 of clause 55 of the Moreland Planning Scheme. And to point 1R, dwelling 1 redesigned to the satisfaction of council to provide a more traditional form and detailing, e.g. windows proportionate to the existing residential built forms. And another one, please, to add in a point 4, so replace current point 4 with prior to the commencement of any development works, a construction management plan must be submitted to and approved by the responsible authority, and then the point 4 that is currently there to become point 5 and every other number to increase by 1. So in other words, to put in an extra one at that, an extra condition at that point. And if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Is there a seconder? Councillor Thompson?
Look, I can understand the residents' view here, but it is in a developmental growth zone, this particular application. You'll see that number 100 further down the road, and I think it's number 98 that have been approved and are actually under construction, are of the same sort of scale that this one is. I do think that it does need to have a construction management plan, and I think that was a very valid point, and that's why I put in point 4. As far as the other conditions go, if you like, I've looked at everything where the application failed to meet standard, and with those conditions now, it meets every standard that is accepted for a development in a residential growth zone, and on the assumption that we do take into account the design and development overlay schedule 20. And as the officer indicated, yes, it's correct that it hasn't been approved by the minister at this point, but it is almost at that point and has been publicly exhibited, and so therefore and under our planning scheme that does gain weight as such. So I can understand the objectors because it is certainly a large change to what is there, but it is on Nicholson Street. It is serviced by the tram out the front. It is serviced by bus lines along Blythe Street, and it is an area where we are encouraging change. So I know that's not wonderful news for some of the residents, but I think on balance this application with those changes to make it to make sure that it does comply, I think it's worth supporting. I do want to thank particularly the first resident, Mark, for the amount of work he's gone to in his objection, we have. I know that I speak on behalf of the other councillors. We haven't taken your objection lightly, but I think on balance this deserves support.
Is it possible to just get a comment from the officers in regards to those additional changes and whether they comply with Res Code, both at the ground level, level 1, 2 and 3, including the balconies?
Is the question in relation to the third story north-facing walls? It says to comply with the standard, so they would have to.
So does that include all of the setbacks?
No, the north-facing walls. And then there's another condition proposed that was
0.68.
In relation to dwelling 1, setback an additional 0.6 metres. But the others, there'd still be non-compliances with the planning scheme, obviously, in relation to site coverage but in terms of these conditions,
Sure.
these
But
would,
on
the
setbacks.
walls would comply with the standards as it's stated in the
And
condition.
dwelling 1 will comply as well if it's pushed 0.68 metres back.
So that's in relation to the front setback. So it's not, res code would require a certain setback, but obviously the design development overlays suggesting a 0 lot line, so coming straight to the boundary. So that's pointless.
Councillor Thompson, do you wish to?
Yes, I'd like to support Councillor Kavanagh's amendment to the report that was presented to us for this evening. And just to echo what Councillor Kavanagh was saying about the particular changes to the planning application, and also including the construction management plan, because as we hear with surrounding businesses and residences that it will be a disruption in some instances. So it's good that the applicant came on board to be able to provide a construction management plan when the rules of construction and how it will be undertaken is provided before anything can happen. And also just to talk about the car parking a little bit. In the report, it's saying that it's going to introduce 30 to 35 movements in the laneway for about 12 seconds each, going from the site to Nicholson Street. And so, I appreciate that it will be an increase on what is currently there. Given the overall vision of the area, it feels as though that that kind of movement and time will be limited to causing some kind of disruption with residents that are currently using the laneway. And just to note that the plans have been amended to allow greater depth of the car spaces from the car stacking scenario, just to allow a bit more turning circle and access for people to move up and down the laneway. And also just to highlight that this is a development that is well below the actual height of what could be developed on the site. It's about 11 metres standing now, but it can potentially go up to 14 metres given the design development overlay that's over the site. And with the rooftop gardens, it actually exceeds the private open space. And I would also just like to say, in terms of, I realise that planning is a very complex thing, and appreciate that when English is in the second language and it's a new process, that it is very difficult. Just encourage residents, if they can, to engage the councillors. That's what we're all here for, to help you guide you through the process. And also, just in terms of traffic management for the other developments that are happening in the area, happy to take that on board and feed it through the council. It's not sort of a decision of the Urban Planning Committee tonight, but certainly happy to provide further information about that.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Are there any further speakers?
I'll speak briefly.
Councillor Hopper?
Thank you. So thank you very much to the objectors who have come out this evening. And I certainly appreciate that in this particular part of Brunswick East, there is a lot of change and growth taking place. And you've seen from the presentation this evening some of those changes. In this particular part of Brunswick East, it's because of the tram stop there. And I recall all of the discussions that took place around the additional traffic impacts that would have. This is a positive outcome in comparison to a lot of the other planning applications that we have seen in this part of Brunswick East. And in fact, of the 3 examples that were provided in the presentation earlier, I know that 2 of those ended up at VCAT with the developers challenging council's conditions to try and get them within the height restrictions that we've imposed and to try and ensure that there were sufficient car parking spaces, with developers trying to go above those height limits and trying to have less car parks parks. One of them, VCAT approved the additional story against council's wishes, and so now it's one more story than we would have liked, and there's extra dwellings there. And the other one, the minister had to call it in to stop Triple R no longer being able to function. So this is a very fraught part of Nicholson Street with development taking place that far exceeds what we would like to see in terms of height and neighbourhood character. And in addition, this is an area of Nicholson Street where a lot of the existing dwellings don't have car park provided for them. So this is actually quite unique in that people who live there will have their own private car parking provided, which will hopefully take some of those cars off the street. So I do acknowledge and recognise that when you're living next door to it, it's probably not what you want there. Aesthetically, it doesn't fit in with what is next door, and I wish that at a planning law level there was something that we could do about aesthetics, but unfortunately there's not. Everyone has different tastes and it's just not within the planning law, but certainly in terms of all of our planning law provisions, in terms of height and setbacks and parking and all of those factors, it does meet what we're seeking, which is not true in the majority of cases on Nicholson Street.
Thank you, Councillor Hopper. Any further speakers?
I'll speak briefly since I'm the only one who hasn't. Look, I came here tonight with the view of probably not accepting this application. However, with the subsequent changes of Councillor Kavanagh, I'm struggling to see where there is significant non-compliance that would we'll be able to hold it up and get a positive outcome of VCAT, and I just can't really find that non-compliance at the moment. Sure, there are areas such as the permeability objective and the site coverage objective, which is slightly out, but considering what we've seen built there and VCAT's history in regards to this area, I don't think they are adequate enough to actually be able to reject this application. For me, it is taking it right to the boundary of what is allowed, even in the new DDO. It would have been great to be able to see 4 dwellings instead of 5. I think that would have alleviated some of the concerns. I also have concerns about now with the additional setbacks, what would that actually mean for the internal amenity and for future residents living in there? Potentially now they're significantly smaller, and I'm not sure whether that's a great outcome for the community either, to have dwellings that have such a small size. We do have at council a apartment design overlay. Unfortunately, that kicks in at 4 or more, so this will not have been assessed under those guidelines. So I'm just really not liking the application, but struggling to see on what grounds we can really reject it. And I think that is how this committee must make up its mind tonight. And in that sense, I will be supporting it. But I feel that it's not the best possible outcome that we could have had on the site. And potentially, if it does end up going to VCAT, some small minor changes might be able to improve it significantly. But I guess that's a decision for later on. But at the moment, I just can't see how we can not accept it.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. I'll put Councillor Kavanagh's motion to the vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried, and I'll pass to Darren Camilleri to outline the legal process from here.
Thank you. So the Urban Planning Committee has resolved to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit in accordance with the alternate recommendation put up on the screen. So all objectors will receive a copy of that notice of decision to grant a planning permit and be given 21 days in which they can appeal that decision to the tribunal. In the extent that no appeal is lodged, then a planning permit will issue, and the applicant's given 60 days in which they can appeal any condition of the planning permit. Thank you.